So, have you ever really stopped to wonder why you react to things the way you do? Why one person gets anxious about something and another person gets totally fired up and excited by the same thing? Well, today we're going to dig into the very architecture of your personality. We're looking at some material that explains not just who you are, but, and this is the exciting part, how you can actually take the wheel and steer your own mental state.
So what's really driving the ship here? Is your mental health basically a product of your genetics, the DNA you were born with? Or is it all about the habits you've built over time? Or maybe something else entirely, something deep in your personality? It's that classic nature versus nurture question, right? But what we're going to see is that the answer is actually, well, it's a mix of all three. And figuring out how they all play together, that's the real key.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with what's called the genetic lottery, basically the hand you were dealt. Then we'll look at why every personality trait is a double-edged sword. After that, we'll get into the power of practice, what it means to confront your dragons, and then finally, we'll chart out your path to order.
All right, let's dive right into section 1, the genetic lottery. So the core idea here is that every single one of us starts out with a kind of built-in blueprint for our personality. It's that fundamental temperament you're born with, the cards you were dealt before you even knew you were in the game.
But what does temperament even mean? Well, you can think of it as your personality's default setting. It's your factory settings, your starting point. It's that collection of built-in predispositions that shapes how you experience pretty much everything. How sensitive you are to joy, how you react to pain, even how curious you are about the world.
Okay, so this temperament is basically built on 5 core dimensions. You might have heard of them as the Big Five in psychology. They're like the fundamental architecture of who you are. So you've got extroversion, which is all about your sensitivity to positive emotion. Then there's neuroticism, which is your sensitivity to negative emotion. Agreeableness is tied to compassion. Conscientiousness is about duty and order. And finally, openness, which is about creativity and new ideas. And where you fall on each of these 5 scales has a massive impact on your life. But, and this is a huge but, there is no right or wrong place to be on any of them.
And that leads us right into our next big idea, that every single one of these traits is a double-edged sword. Seriously, there are no good traits or bad traits. Every single position on that personality map, every single setting, comes with both pros and cons. It is all about trade-offs.
Yep, every advantage comes with a disadvantage. You really got to let that one sink in. This isn't about wishing you were more extroverted or less neurotic or whatever. It's about understanding the built-in upsides and downsides of the way you're already wired. So, let's break this down with some real examples.
Okay, let's start with extroversion. The advantage? Your social energy is amazing. You're engaging, you're positive, you can light up a room. That's a huge gift. But what's the disadvantage? Well, that same engine that drives you toward positive emotion can also make you more impulsive. It can make it really, really hard to just be alone.
Or how about neuroticism, sensitivity to negative emotion? The downside is pretty obvious. You're probably going to suffer more from anxiety and emotional pain. But what's the upside? That very same sensitivity means you're incredible at spotting threats. You see danger coming a mile away, which, let's be honest, is a pretty handy survival skill to have.
Same thing with agreeableness. Being highly agreeable makes you an amazing friend. You're compassionate, caring, empathetic, just wonderful to be around. The flip side, though, is that you might have a really tough time standing up for yourself. And if you let that go on for too long, it can curdle into resentment.
And then there's openness, or creativity. This is a perfect example of a high-risk, high-reward strategy. The advantage is you generate a ton of new ideas. Awesome, right? But the disadvantage, the hard truth, is that almost all of those creative ideas are going to be wrong. They're just going to fail.
I mean, check this out. The source brings up this wild study that looked at creative achievement across 13 different fields. Music, writing, the whole deal. And the most common score for creative achievement, the number that came up more than any other, it was 0. A big fat 0. That just goes to show you how brutally difficult and rare real creative success actually is.
Okay, so if your temperament is basically fixed by your genes, does that mean you're just stuck? Is that it? Absolutely not. And this is where we get to the power of practice, because your genetics might be the starting point, but they are not your destiny. You become what you do, and that's all about habit.
Right. The big takeaway here is that you are not stuck with the cards you were dealt. I mean, an introvert can totally learn to be a great public speaker. A super agreeable person can learn how to negotiate and be more assertive. It's not about changing your fundamental nature, it's about adding new skills to your toolkit through practice.
So the billion-dollar question is, how do you do it? How do you actually build those skills and expand that toolkit? Well, it turns out there's one universal mechanism for all of it, and it's this. You have to voluntarily confront the things you're afraid of and avoiding. That's it. That is the path to getting stronger.
And look, I know that sounds kind of abstract, so let's make it super concrete. There's this really powerful story about a client that shows exactly how this works in the real world, how you can face down something that you find absolutely terrifying.
Get this. A client described their resume, just a file on a computer, as Pandora's box with a dragon in it. They hadn't opened this file in 10 years, because for them, it wasn't just a document. It was a symbol of every past failure, just a box jam-packed to shame and regret that was too painful to even look at.
Now, the therapist didn't just say, hey, suck it up and open it. No way. Instead, they broke the task down into the tiniest, most microscopic steps imaginable. Step 1, sit at the computer and just imagine opening the file. That's it. Then practice that until the anxiety goes down. Then, okay, turn on the computer, open the folder. You see? By making the steps voluntarily small, the client could slowly, carefully get closer and closer to that dragon without getting burned.
And this whole process, it's about so much more than just updating a resume, right? Confronting those dragons, that's about reclaiming your own story. It's about being willing to look into those messy, chaotic parts of your past, to make sense of them, and to build a solid, coherent story about yourself that you can actually stand on as you move forward.
Okay, so this is all great in theory, but how do we actually apply this to our own lives? Where in the world do you start confronting all the chaos and creating order? Well, the answer is surprisingly practical and simple. I want you to think about your room, or maybe your desk. When it's a total chaotic mess, how does that make you feel? The argument here is that your external world has a direct line to your internal world. A messy, chaotic environment is basically broadcasting anxiety and confusion straight into your brain, whether you realize it or not. And this is where we get to the path for creating order. You don't start by trying to solve world hunger. You start small. You start local. You start with your room. You organize it. You declutter. You simplify. You replace that accidental chaos with deliberate order. And once you've got that solid ordered base, then you can move outward. You can work on your relationships. And once that's in order, you can take on bigger and bigger challenges.
And again, this is not just about having a tidy room, it goes so much deeper. When you take these practical step-by-step actions to create order, you're actually doing something profound to your own biology. You're lowering your body's stress response. You are literally making yourself more resilient. You're practicing the fundamental human art of turning chaos into a place you can actually live.
So when you put it all together, what does it mean? It means that, yeah, we don't get to choose our genetic cards, but we absolutely 100% have the power to choose how we play the hand we're dealt. The path forward isn't about running from your dragons. It's about choosing, voluntarily, which small bit of chaos you're going to confront and turn into order today. So, what's it going to be?